The grand hall of the Wayfarers' Concourse hummed with a low, polite chatter. It was the intermission during the annual Cultural Exchange Gala, a glittering event where the many species of the Galactic Accord showcased their arts. The air smelled of ozone from force fields, exotic perfumes, and refreshment vapors. On the stage sat the centerpiece of the evening, an instrument brought from Earth, a relic of polished wood and ivory keys. A grand piano, a group of young attendees, a mix of human and non-human, stood near it. Among them was a human girl, small for her age, dressed in a simple, clean jumpsuit that marked her as a maintenance ward from the station's orphanage. She stared at the piano with wide, absorbed eyes, her fingers twitching slightly at her sides. One of the boys, a tall human with impeccably tailored clothes, noticed her gaze and smirked. He nudged his companion, a slender being with violet skin and large eyes. "Look, the scrap rat is fascinated by the noise box. Think she's wondering what salvage grade it is?" The violet-skinned youth let out a soft, fluting laugh. "It is a complex resonance device. Its operation requires calculated precision, not childish curiosity." The girl flinched, but did not look away from the piano. Her hand lifted, almost of its own accord, reaching towards the smooth, cool wood. "Don't touch that," the tall boy snapped, his voice cutting through the murmur. Several heads turned. "That's a Terran antique, worth more than your entire life support sector. Your hands are probably greasy." The girl's hand froze in midair. A hot flush crept up her neck. She heard a few scattered titters from the growing ring of onlookers. A Bolvi merchant, his fur groomed to a shine, shook his head in clear disapproval. A serene Elysian diplomat glanced over with mild, pitying interest. "I said, move along," the boy repeated, enjoying the audience. "Go back to polishing conduits." But the station's head curator, an elderly human man with kind eyes, had been observing. He saw not grubby hands, but long, slender fingers. He saw not ignorant curiosity, but a profound, aching focus. He stepped forward. "Is there a problem?" His voice was calm. "She was going to touch the instrument, curator," the boy said. Smug-dot the curator looked at the girl, saw the shame and the stubborn longing warring on her face. He made a decision. And why should she not? It is here to be appreciated. Touch is a part of appreciation. He turned to the girl. "Would you like to appreciate it?" The crowd murmured, surprised. This was a breach of protocol. The girl, stunned, could only nod. The curator gave her a small, encouraging smile and gestured to the piano bench. The mockers exchanged amused glances. This would be a delightful disaster. The girl slowly, carefully, sat on the very edge of the bench, as if afraid she might break it. She stared at the black and white keys, a landscape of potential she had only ever dreamed of through stolen moments on a broken datapad with old lesson files. "Well, make some noise," the tall boy whispered loudly. The girl took a deep, shaky breath. She closed her eyes. In her mind, she was not in a glittering hall under the gaze of 1,000 aliens. She was in a small, quiet room from a memory she barely owned, where a woman with a kind smile had hummed a tune. The music was there, locked away, a aching, beautiful thing. Her hands lifted, and then she began to play. The first notes were soft, tentative, a simple, lonely melody. It was nothing special, and the tall boy rolled his eyes. But the girl did not stop. Her fingers gained strength, sinking into the keys. The simple melody unfolded, deepened, weaving into a rich, harmonic tapestry. It was a piece of earth music, old and timeless, full of melancholy and quiet hope. The notes rose and fell like a breath, like a heartbeat. The hall fell utterly silent. The chatter died. The clink of glasses ceased. Every eye was fixed on the small figure on the stage. Her eyes were still closed, her face a mask of intense concentration and something else, something like grief and joy intertwined. Her hands, now sure and powerful, flew across the keyboard. The music swelled. A torrent of emotion made sound, filling the vast space. It spoke of blue skies, lost homes, enduring love, and the lonely, beautiful ache of the human spirit. The Bolvi merchant's fur bristled, not in anger, but in raw emotional response. The Elysian diplomat's serene facade cracked, a single glistening tear tracing a path down her cheek. The violet-skinned youth stood motionless, his large eyes wider than ever, his analytical mind overwhelmed by the data stream of pure feeling. She transitioned without pause. The mournful piece finished on a questioning note, and then her hands crashed down in a new, furious rhythm. This was tempestuous, a storm of notes, a defiant roaring anthem of survival and rage. It was the sound of starship engines and the clamor of a species that refused to be quiet. It was humanity's stubborn scream into the void. When the final, thunderous chord faded into a ringing silence, the girl's shoulders slumped. She was drained. She opened her eyes, blinking as if waking from a dream, and seemed to remember where she was. She shrank back, afraid of the reaction, expecting the laughter to return twice as loud. There was no laughter. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then the curator, tears streaming openly down his wrinkled face, began to clap. It was a single, solid sound. Then another joined, and another. A Bolvi clapped his upper limbs together. The Elysian chimed the rings on her fingers. The hall erupted into a cacophony of applause, cheers, and respectful vocalizations from a dozen different species. It was a wall of sound, warm and overwhelming. The tall boy who had mocked her stood with his mouth agape, his face pale. He was not applauding. He was simply understanding, for the first time, that he had been in the presence of something vast, and he had called it small. The girl sat, bewildered, until the curator gently helped her to her feet. He guided her to the front of the stage. The applause washed over her. She saw not mockery, but awe. Not pity, but respect. A grizzled Tarkellan captain, a species known for their martial prowess and minimal emotional display, approached the stage. His voice was a low gravel. Little human. That sound. What was its name? The girl found her voice, a whisper that was amplified through the hall's systems. It was home. It was just home. The captain nodded solemnly. We have heard the symphonies of crystal. We have measured the frequency poems of the gas giants. We thought we knew music. He placed a heavy, clawed hand over his own chest. Today, we learned we did not. You did not play an instrument. You showed us your soul. And it is formidable. The revelation spread through the accord. The story of the maintenance ward girl and the piano became legend. It was not a story about music. It was a story about depth. Humans, the galactic newcomers, so often seen as clever but chaotic, resourceful but crude, were suddenly perceived in a new light. They carried inside them this capacity, this bottomless well of feeling and expression that could be translated into sound, into art, into being. Their sentimentality was not a weakness, but a latent power. Their history of conflict was now viewed alongside this staggering ability to create beauty from pain. The girl was offered mentorships, scholarships, a life away from the maintenance ducts. She accepted, but on her own terms. She still worked. She still learned the station. But now she also played. And when she played, the crowded concourse would fall silent. Species who could not agree on trade routes or border delineations would stand together, united for a few minutes by a melody. The mockery had sought to shrink her world to a greasy fingerprint on polished wood. But her fingers had answered with the depth of oceans, the fire of stars, and the quiet, unbreakable memory of home. She had not just played a piano. She had shown the galaxy that humanity's greatest strength was not in their technology, but in their profound and terrifying capacity to feel and to make others feel it too. And in that, she had forever changed the tune.